Hey everyone, it's Rayphear here, and I'm going to be doing a fan media today. I'm going to be going over the review of Ajin. It's a Netflix original, and the reason why I'm going over this is a recent series that I've watched, and there was another Netflix anime that I watched recently that was really good, and this was on the anime list, so I was like, okay, I'll watch it. Now, I first must disclose these two things before I go on. And first, I do not feel this is an anime. Okay, here's my reason why. Before I go on to anything else, is first, what I consider to be anime is it's hand drawn and it has to be hand animated, and all the assets. Same with that. Other thing is comes from Japan and is in the anime style. So you have to at least have two of those things, and it does have two of those things, but I feel the one thing that it doesn't have is the more crucial and is in a different category, and that is that it's CG. Because it is not hand animated, it might be in the anime style, it might come from Japan, but I really, because it is a 3D animation, it belongs into that realm. For me, like, when it comes to Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels, those all fall under CG series, not cartoon series or anything. It might have the aspects of those, like anime and cartoon, but it's all a different art. And I guess that's the reason why. So because it is a different art form than hand-drawn animation, it requires to be in CG. So to me, it's misleading that it's an anime, because it's like, okay, yes, it might be these things, but it's clearly CG because of its 3D nature. Okay, now the next thing is that the rating. I will say that I will always go over what to expect of a rating level when it comes to any type of media. And this one, I feel, is between PG-13 and R. Even though it says M, I think, unfortunately, I like the movie rating system the best because I feel that you have a better nature of knowing what it is. I don't know, games, even though they do say all these titles, I still feel that they're somewhat vague and it doesn't have that thing. In TV, it does have that too, but I go by movies, so it's in between. It's not quite R and it's not quite PG-13. It is violent and it has an adult theme to it. So a lot of things that they do is very very on that edge of it's not a happy-go-lucky show. It's very drama. But when it comes to graphic, it's not as graphic. There's a lot of implying things, and that's when I feel you hit R, when you hit that gore mark, or that mark of just always constantly hitting that adult nature, and it really tries to be the in between. It does have a lot of adult form, but it does have a lot of things that it implies, and it doesn't keep repeating itself. So the theme of the show is more adult, whereas the content is more tame, like a PG-13. So anyway, but it does have some graphical natures where I had to go, oops, censor hand. Like that's what when I'm watching anything that is a little bit more of that manner, I will have to say I put my hands up and I censor it. In my opinion, I like to watch entertainment, and I don't want entertainment that dramatize me. So that's why some does do those things. So anyway, that is just my nature of the review. So a lot of zombie movies, that happens a lot. Anyway, moving on though. So the synopsis of the story is that you're following a character, and his name is Nagi, and what essentially he is just a normal schoolboy that's unique. That's like, he's trying to be normal, but everybody around him treats him differently. He's smarter, he's all this other stuff, but he himself is, they try to make him normal, but he's not. So in the beginning, they do all these things, but he's not normal. And then the main protagonist, or antagonist, I'm sorry, not protagonist, is as Mr. Sato. Now, unfortunately, this series has a ton of them, though. There's bad guys everywhere in this series, and like maybe a couple good guys that you like. And so I'm mostly going to be talking about those characters. There are a couple of characters that I did like, but since I'm trying to condense this and I'm already used a lot of my time, I'm only going to be talking about those things. So let me first go on to my critical side of this series. And big things. Now I'm going to discuss the story, and there are going to be spoilers constantly because I'm not good at trying to keep things organized and non-spoiler and spoiler. I just kind of say my opinion. So if you don't want to hear it, stop right now. So anyway, again, now the story's about essentially not demi-humans, which is called Ajin, and they're immortal. So, you know, there are plenty of characters that have the immortal theme to them, but this series tries to play it more in a horrific manner, that these people can die in horrible ways, and it's painful, and they still live, but the theme is really, death is no limit. And so that's kind of the cool factor about it. And then society really rejects them and entraps them, and Nagi is essentially one of those Aji, and he essentially dies right in the beginning, and then everybody goes, oh, they're there, and then he runs for it, and that's his whole entire thing. He runs for it. And then there is the government that is trying to put their hand in all these places to learn what they can from it, so they can develop more of a military weapons and so on and so forth. And then there is Mr. Sato, which is another Aji who is has his own agenda. He tries to play off that he is trying to free everybody, but really you can see he's just doing whatever he can. And unfortunately, how it's written, he's supposed to be really smart and all these things, but there's just things that fall apart constantly. And so let me go into some things. Like, this is the big pet peeve I have with it. It does two things that I dislike constantly. It does this constantly. Is one, it introduces like abilities or characters, and then by the end of the show, they're non-existent. For example, Aji can paralyze people with their voices. Well, I believe in one part of the series, Nagi gets captured, and he's in it, and they're doing horrific experiments with it. And I'm pretty sure about this, but the surgeons that are working on him are not wearing earplugs. And he's screaming all the time and doing all these things, and it's muffled, but like it's a supernatural echo, so it would go through that, so they, in my opinion, would be paralyzed. And I think it's used maybe one other time, but this ability that they could use is hardly used. It's just introduced and then thrown. And again, Nagi has a friend of his, and he comes in, saves his life, and then it's like, I think it's like the third or fourth episode, he all of a sudden goes, bam, I'm going to take off my own, and then his character does nothing else. So the series goes nowhere. Unfortunately, you're left with that, well, what happened to his best friend? Did he get mad and never go after him, or is he searching for him right now? And they never even hint at him like looking for him, or at least, and good enough, not something vague like it's him like riding his bike saying, "Have you seen this person?" Blah blah blah, something of that nature. So we know at least what this character is doing because he's just gone. And I think they do that to introduce other characters, but unfortunately, I'm sorry. When you have so much focus, especially in the beginning, to a certain character, and then you just kind of leave it off to introduce other characters, that's really bad narrative, in my opinion. Anyway, so and I have to talk about Mr. Sato. So Mr. Sato is an old, nice senior man. So his exterior is supposed to be very happy, and that's the thing is that when you see most anime of his appearance, he's supposed to be that nice, inspiring old man that you come up and you feel very entrusted, and that's what they're trying to imply with him. But what happens is that in his interior, he's this evil psychopath, and I think that is a cool idea. It wasn't well executed, and this is kind of the reason is that during the other half of the show, because they do Aji form into into they're humans that form into these things, and it's through all these means. But what happens later on in the show is they find when Mr. Sato starts bringing in his kind of army of Ajis and started to form them, you find this cripple guy that when he get turned into an Aji, he can't walk properly, and even his regeneration doesn't affect that. And it's like, oh, okay, well, that's cool. So he always has that defect. But the problem with doing that character is that Mr. Sato's an old man. So now that suspension of belief of, oh, okay, Aji are superhumans, and that they just get all these powerful and do all these things, and they're useful because Mr. Sato acts like he's like in his mid-20s, early 30s, in his prime, doing all these like spectacular feats. And if that cripple guy couldn't have those abilities when he turned into it, Mr. Sato, if he's an old man, would be going, I have a gun, I'm old. And so when I saw that, I was like, oh, no, yeah, so, and again, that is just a prime example of what happens constantly in this. So, and I'm going to have to talk very briefly upon the shotgun scene. So, again, another big complaint about this story is that there's this huge shotgun scene with Mr. Sato, and he's doing all these things because essentially it's a big plot, and that scene, even though it was cool, essentially he is trying to take down a corporation and puts a building or demolishes a building on top of another building, destroying the corporation. And it was cool to see him fall, but the problem with that scene is when he would land, even though he's immortal, he would go splat, and then he would be in rubble. So the government would just come and just put him in bags and be able to take him off to prison. So they act like, again, he came up and he was all fine. But anyway, what's waiting for him is this elite police group, and they're going to incapacitate him. And how their plan is just to shoot him every so often, because they know the exact time when they regenerate, and so they can do it. Now, what breaks this to begin with is that if they're so elite, the bounds that they put him in, they only put him on a gurney and then keep shooting him as they go. I'm sorry, if you're that elite, you would know that you would bound the person you're imprisoning to the point where he can't move entirely, especially if you know that he can take on all these elite things. I mean, and I always think of duct tape. Just duct tape him up so he can't move from the gurney. But again, they would use different means and way better than just duct tape. But they do that, and that's just the problem with it is that they that he can easily escape. And so now he does have a group that tries to do that, and that whole entire scene as they're trying to revive him is very cool and intense. But when he revives, he starts doing these cool things with the shotgun, and he's like really elite, and he's taking down all these elite shoulders. The problem with two problems I have with that scene is that all these elite police officers are carrying high-power automatic rifles. And I'm sorry, they do try to explain it like, don't shoot, I'm in the way. But it's like, if they're highly trained, they would fan out instead of trying to be around him. And then even if they knew he was going to be that bad and they knew people were dying, they probably would shoot into him and just hope for the best. And I'm sorry, it only would take two people with high power automatic rifles to be like, brrr, and he's incapacitated because he dies from it, and then they would put him on the gurney again. So there's the first part. Second part is that I don't know if it's because they didn't have the money to put the effects in it, or if they were just trying to make it clean and less gory. And if it's those two reasons, then I completely understand. But for some odd reason, I do think it's the latter, that they just didn't understand how guns work, and so all these things that were happening with guns, it's like, well, one, too many ammunition, and two, we don't know if this is slugs or if it's buckshot or any of those things. But he's had such a close range that things would just not be happy for whoever is on the end. So even though they try to make this cool scene, my suspension of belief was just broken entirely because of all the facts that they didn't follow. And necessarily you don't have to do that sometimes. You can make a cool scene and you can make it fictional to life, but you have to put enough of it so we can believe in it, enough fact to be like, oh, this is believable. Anyway, okay, I'm running out of time. I do set timers on these. So now I'm going to talk about the reasons why, my fan side, reasons why I thought this thing is awesome. I guess it's not awesome, but certain aspects of this series was pretty dang cool. And one is the ghost fights. So there's these things called black ghosts, and they are a matter that is complicated and confusing. And if you want to know about it, just watch the show, and you can be confused as well. Anyway, they exist in the world, but it's a different type of material. So, like, only Ajin can see them, and when the only time people really see them is when they're about to die or in a very emotional state. And they're just very cool looking. I think that those were the two things that attracted me to this series. Is that the very beginning, where all this stuff happens with these poor individual people that are trying to kill an Ajin. That was very gripping. And then the other thing that was gripping is when the first Ajin or first Black Ghost comes along and starts to do all these things, and helps Nagi get away. But throughout the show, and this is why I watched the show, probably one of the only reasons, is that these Black Ghosts have different traits depending on the person that they have, and they fight with each other, and it is really cool, those fight scenes. And those things were planned very well. Where unlike the gun scenes, which no one really had a clue how guns worked, those scenes right there are really cool because they have tons of martial arts, very good choreographed on a raw or clean basis. And I think that's why I watched this whole entire series, is just to see the Black Ghost fight, and I go, this is amazing! These two monsters are fighting at, and they're doing cool stuff. And I think for that very reason, this series is that cool because of that. Now, overall, I think, as you heard, I had a lot more to complain about than a lot more of its cool aspects. But there are some scenes in here that are really cool. Narrative-wise, I would say if you're huge on that, probably don't watch this series because it's going to constantly bug you. Especially if you know facts and some of this stuff. But again, it's trying to go off the more horror aspect of dying unlimited deaths, and just the fight scenes with the Black Ghosts and those things alone were really cool. And as I said, there are some scenes that you'll probably not see in other things, like Mr. Sato riding on that building all the way down. There is a character, which I guess is probably the only other protagonist that works for the government, kind of forced to, because she is an Ajin as well. But she is a really cool character. Unfortunately, she's not developed well. Like, that's one of the characters, like, oh wow, I like your design really well, but I would like to know more about this character to be attached to it. And so if you're just looking for there are a lot of situations where it is intense. So if you're not all about that intensity, don't watch it. But it does have a lot of that intense atmosphere and that a different side of mortality, in a horrific manner that I've never seen before. And so and so that was interesting about it. But mainly, I watched it for the Black Ghost fight scenes. So, and would I say I would like to see a second version of this series? Yes. And the reason why, just Black Ghost. So, so anyway, that's all going to be it for this review, and I thank you for listening to me. Again, if you guys have any questions for me, always just go to my website, send me through my contacts, and I will try to take some time out and talk about these things. But anyway, thank you for listening, and I will talk to you later.